morning. Thank you so much for joining us for our program on accessible gardening for life. We are with the El Paso County Master Gardeners, and we are talking about a topic that is near and dear to our hearts. First of all, I'd like to introduce my co-presenter, Bev Clark.
Hi.
This brilliant woman is a lifelong gardener. She's also a compost specialist and a vegetable garden specialist, and she's earned this through her advanced training with Master Gardeners. And my name is Leslie, and I'm a propagation specialist. So in addition to our passion for gardening, we also have a passion for health and wellness. Bev has worked as a massage therapist for many years, and I continue to work as a speech pathologist. I use these accessible gardening techniques in my practice, and I can tell you firsthand the benefits that people receive both physically, cognitively, and emotionally by being able to continue their passion for gardening. Before we begin, we have a couple of housekeeping notes. First, for our live audience here on Eventbrite, we ask that you please place yourselves on mute and turn your video off during the presentation. Secondly, we want to encourage you to post your comments and questions in our chat box. Jan will be monitoring your comments and your questions, and we hope to address as many as possible at the end of our presentation. This is a live program being presented on Eventbrite and will be available at a later time on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, share with your friends, and hit that notification bell so that we can let you know when we post new videos. All right, let's get started. I have a couple of questions I want you to think about before we get into the meat of the program. First of all, do you love gardening but find that health conditions are impacting your ability to get the job done? Do you know people who are giving up gardening or not even considering gardening because of physical or cognitive challenges? Well, adaptive gardening techniques may be your answer. There are countless ways for you to adapt the gardening environment. So during this program, we're going to provide techniques, adaptations, and tools that will help you to create your own individualized accessible garden. These ideas can be used by you at your home, in backyard gardening, or it can be easily implemented in the community in places like senior living communities. So let's get started. The knee you save may be your own. So we have a philosophy we wanted to share with you, and it is this: everyone, regardless of physical, cognitive, or emotional challenges, regardless of changes that occur with aging or constraints imposed by the time limits in our environment, everyone with some creative planning can experience the joy of gardening throughout their lives. Today's program, we're going to introduce you to many different aspects of accessible gardening. We're going to define accessible gardening, and it may actually cast a wider net than you thought it might initially. We're also going to talk about research-based physical, cognitive, and emotional benefits of accessible gardening, and give you lots of examples about ways that you can modify your gardens and prepare them for successful gardening. Additionally, we're going to share lots of examples about resources that are available so that you can continue to learn and grow after this presentation. And of course, we hope to have lots of time for questions at the end. So, accessible. What does accessible gardening mean? Well, accessible means that you can get at or gain access to something, and in this case, it's gardening. But I want you to think about accessible gardening also as enabled gardening. Yes, at first you may simply think it's about physical challenges, and you would be partially correct. Yes, people who require a wheelchair for mobilization have great benefits in using accessible gardening. But it's also for people with other physical infirmities and a wide range of what I call annoyances as we get older as a result of aging. Accessible gardening is also for people with sensory challenges with reduced hearing and vision. But it's also for people with cognitive challenges. So accessible gardening can help people to partially restore cognitive functioning or to potentially compensate for chronic cognitive changes. And then there's the emotional side. Accessible gardening may mean making a peaceful gardening area that will reduce stress or that will encourage people to develop ways to cope and deal with emotional challenges. So as you can see, there's a lot of other aspects besides simply physical that encompass accessible gardening. And as we're widening our definition, I want you also to consider that gardening doesn't always have to happen outdoors, that it also can happen indoors. And we want people from all ages and abilities to be able to continue to reap the benefits of gardening. So let's talk about what some of those research benefits are. And the first one is physical benefits. So research shows that there's a strong therapeutic connection between people and plants. And let's think about the physical benefits as gardening helps us to keep moving. So gardening can contribute to the 2.5 hours a week of moderate exercise that the CDC recommends that we all participate in. And they include gardening as part of that moderate activity. So what does gardening do to help us to keep moving? It helps with stretching, strengthening muscles, increasing flexibility, promoting eye-hand coordination, and stamina. In addition to the physical, gardening also has cognitive benefits. Gardening provides a healthy workout for our brains, and research has shown that working in the garden actually promotes brain nerve growth as we benefit from lifelong learning. So if you think about it, there's lots of thinking required in order to garden. And these are just some of the things that we use. We use the powers of observation. Memory is so important in gardening so that we remember what we did last year and what we need to do next year and what all our plans are for our garden. Of course, those planning centers in our brain and problem-solving opportunities are always welcome and in the gardening effort. And cognitively, it keeps our creative juices flowing. So think of gardening as keep on thinking. And thirdly, finally, the social emotional benefits of gardening. It helps us to stay happy. So look at the opportunities afforded by gardening for social and emotional growth. We have social interaction opportunities, sharing memories and suggestions, those all-important lifelong learning opportunities, stimulating the senses, and relaxation. So, gardening for life. Whether you or a loved one are gardening to keep moving, to keep thinking, or to simply stay happy, know that you can continue to garden for life by discovering ways to adapt and create enabled gardening opportunities. Just imagine the possibilities. And now we've got Bev to show us how to actually make all of these thoughts work. Bev, over to you.
Thanks, Penny. And she's right. Imagine the possibilities. There are countless ways to garden, and many of them can be adapted to accessible gardening. So let's take a look at a few of those. The traditional garden is the very essence of backyard gardening, but can present some special challenges. Gardeners with physical limitations can't always adapt to using standard gardening tools. They may have some issues with moving easily and safely on loose tilled soil. They may not be able to get down to or even reach some crops to tend or harvest. And for those gardeners who must use canes, walkers, or even wheelchairs, just maneuvering through garden paths with ease around vines can be impossible. But there are some modifications you can do. Depending on the mobility of the gardener, a traditional garden can be remodeled by adding firm surface walkways, by creating designated planting areas, and by using appropriate ergonomically designed tools and techniques to make gardening tasks easier. Also, by installing manual or automated irrigation systems. You may even decide that you want to consult a specialist to help you design a garden that works for you. Maybe your physical limitations make in-ground gardening impossible. How about a raised bed? The basic idea behind raised beds and other similar structures is if you can't get down to the soil, make it come up to you. No pathways are needed in a raised bed. The entire soil surface is for planting. No heavy cultivation of the soil, no plowing, no tilling, nada, not one little bit, except maybe for some light turning with a spade. You can plant earlier in a raised bed because the soil in a raised bed warms up a lot sooner than the soil in an in-ground garden. You can gear specific raised beds for specific plants, like say for roses or even a pollinator garden. Or you could even set up special raised beds for spring, summer, or fall and winter vegetable gardening. You can also plant closer in a raised bed, which also helps to crowd out weeds, and it creates a nice shading canopy to help slow down moisture evaporation. Placement anywhere in your landscape is a plus also, as long as it meets plant light and moisture requirements, and that the placement makes it accessible for you to work around the garden. There are a few disadvantages. The costs involved to build a raised bed. There are all kinds of materials out there available, from cinder blocks, landscape timbers, dimension lumber, rocks, brick, and even logs. And then there's also the cost involved in filling that raised bed with soil and the appropriate amendments. You'll have to shop around, check prices, and decide what you can afford and what works best for you. Again, soil heats up faster. So some plants, some young tender plants, may need to be shaded. And that's another thing for you to look in on what kind of shading you need to use, what works for you and is appropriate for the plants you want to protect. Soil dries out quickly in a raised bed, so you're going to have to water more frequently. That doesn't mean water longer at one time. That just means add more watering opportunities to your weekly schedule. Tall plants can grow out of reach, and when they're in a raised bed, they can even grow higher. So whether they're on a trellis or if they're growing tall on themselves, those with physical limitations may need some help with tending, managing, and even harvesting from tall plants. And also there's the maintenance of the framework. Over time, raised beds, the structure, the walls may need some maintenance to keep them safe, durable, and long-lasting. Gardening in a planter box. Some physical challenges may present the need for a different kind of raised bed, a planter box. You can build planter boxes anywhere from 18 to 30 inches tall. This is determined by the gardener's physical requirements. Sometimes you may even want to build them taller than 30 inches. Structures are fairly permanent for the most part. So again, when you're considering that location of where to put them, please consider the light and moisture requirements for the plants you intend to grow there and your accessibility to be able to get around them and work your garden area. Planter boxes can be any size, shape, and even design to fit the location on your landscape. And they can even have a cap or border for sitting, like you can see in the bottom lower left picture. Anything that you can do to make it easier for you to work that raised bed or planter box. And even set one up close to a faucet so that you can do easy hand watering if that's what you desire to do. An old idea that continues to increase in popularity, container gardening is another great accessible gardening option. And it's also a great way to introduce new gardeners to gardening. Appropriate in urban or rural, I can't pronounce that word, rural areas, container gardening can be done almost anywhere. Almost any fruit, herb, or vegetable can be grown in them depending on the size of the container. And you can use commercially prepared or homemade planting soils. Depending on the size of the structure, the larger ones like you see in the bottom right picture, you can get away with using some types of garden soils, but the smaller the container, the more you want to go to using commercially prepared potting mixes because they're lighter in weight, they don't hold as much water. And that can be a big factor when you're moving them around. Again, they can be easily moved to meet sunshade requirements depending on their size. For potted plants, you can get these neat little trolley scooters that they can easily be rolled around and moved where you want them. And gardening in containers works great for all ages. And it's a great way to strengthen the bond between young gardeners and older gardeners. And it's perfect for that thrill, fill, and spill gardening method, as you see in the picture of the potted plant or the container right below it. And container gardening is perfect for trying out new vegetables or flowers that you don't think you're ready yet to put in your planters, raised beds, or in-ground gardens. Give them a chance, try them out, experiment, see what you like to grow first before you commit to a bigger area. The startup cost for container gardening is the most minimal of all of the garden methods I've talked about so far. It's easy. It's an easy way for you to start getting into gardening. And it provides that stop and smell the roses oasis invite. Perfect to set up around a patio or a small backyard area so that you can just get out there and relax and take in the essence of what you're doing. And container gardening requires far less maintenance than planter boxes, raised beds, or in-ground gardening. Minimal time, very little time does it take to go out and weed, tend to a plant, or harvest. And you can use a wide variety of pots, boxes, and other containers. Even sizes and shapes are adjustable to the gardener's needs. All of these methods, all of these gardening techniques and methods that I've just talked about, whether it's containers, planters, raised beds, or even in-ground gardening, are great for promoting health and wellness in senior living and therapeutic rehabilitation settings. Any accessible garden situation can be improved by adding a trellis. And there are trellises out there for every gardening method you might choose to use. They're easy to set up and they expand your gardening possibilities by getting those vining crops up off the ground. Even if your degree of mobility has you confined to a wheelchair or even a scooter, there is a raised bed option for you. For those gardeners who cannot easily go outside to garden, listen now while Penny shares the possibilities for indoor gardening.
Thank you, Bev. Wow, that's a lot of information and a lot of great gardening opportunities. So let's talk about indoor gardening. Not all gardening happens outside. Indoor gardening holds most of the same benefits as outdoor gardening and can be enjoyed in the comfort of your own home or in airy rec rooms or even as a bedside activity. You can fill small pots with herbs. You can use them for cooking or for just sensory stimulation, and succulents are really fun to do in small pots as well. Then you can engage your creative juices in other kinds of plants like bonsais and bulbs, both of those do really well indoors. And propagation is another way to bring the outdoors in. It not only allows you to start new plants, but it gives the person who is gardening a sense of giving birth, if you will, to new life. So we've got things like stem cuttings, leaf cuttings that you can do, planting seeds, or simply putting vines into some water to begin rooting. And one of the really fun tabletop activities that you can find all over the internet are combining crafts and plants. And the picture that's in the lower right corner looks like lots of fun and something that grandma can do with the grandkids. It's hose, and then you put seeds of grass on top of it and make little creatures and watch it grow. Just thought that would be a really fun thing to share. So get on the internet, look at all kinds of different tabletop gardening possibilities. So now that we know what we can do, let's talk about how we do it. And using gardening tools that are appropriate for physical abilities is key. So here are some examples. These are actually short handle tools and are great for using in the raised beds that Bev was talking about to extend reach. These are commercially available tools that help with wrist positioning to make sure that you're not hurting your joints. This is another one that's great. It's a ratcheted pruner. And if you have any grip issues, it really takes the pressure and stress off of the joints. This is another commercially available product that can also be made from homemade materials, and it helps to extend the reach of people who have limited mobility in their upper extremities. There are commercially available tools that are ergonomically designed so that you can lift and dig without hurting your back. And this is my all-time favorite because it has so many different uses, the old kneeling bench. See here that it's got cushions on both sides, little arms so that you can just sit down and do your gardening tasks. It has a place to carry your tools so you don't have to go back and forth. And then you can flip it over and there's a cushion on the bottom and it helps with kneeling. And then you have supports to help you to stand back up again. So it's just got lots of uses and it's pretty lightweight and can be carried pretty easily in the garden. And another homemade kind of accessory is the apron. So if someone has memory problems and has to run back to get every tool, or has issues with stamina and has to walk back to the shed every time they need a tool, this can be a lifesaver because all the tools can be thought of ahead of time and taken with you. So those are just some examples, and we'll talk more about tools in a minute. So let's talk about some of the resources, because again, I want you to be able to find things once this presentation is over and you actually start your accessible gardens. So these are some things that we can present as El Paso Master Gardeners. Bev and I are happy to go out and grab all of our other Master Gardener friends and give presentations to your group so we can gear it to whatever your needs are. Just need to have that scheduled. We also have a wonderful accessible garden area in our Ascarity Education and Demonstration Garden, which is located at Ascarity Park. And it has lots and lots of examples of the things that Bev was talking about for raised beds and container gardening, walkways, benches, and such. So you can come out and visit the garden, check the website for hours to see what we have, to see what you might want to construct in your own area, talk to the gardeners who built them. Or you can actually ask for a guided tour, and we'd be glad to set that up. We can also provide a hands-on opportunity to sample some adaptive or modified tools. We have some commercially available ones and some really creative ones that one of our master gardeners helped to build, so that you know that you don't have to spend a gob of money on it, but you can still have appropriate tools. And finally, and most importantly, we've got lots of handouts and resources available for you on our website. One of the best ones, and this is Bev's favorite, and I'm just going to steal her thunder here, it's called the Illustrated Practical Guide for Gardening for Seniors, How to Maintain a Beautiful Outside Space with Ease and Safety in Later Years. And this is what it looks like. And it's, to Bev, it's the Bible. So it's got everything in it, from how to construct beds to how to garden. It's not just for seniors, it's gardening in general, and it's a really, really good book to get. I wanted to show you a couple of our handouts that we created so that you can just get a feeling for what's available on our website. So this one is called Creating an Accessible Garden. And it's a really good one if you are trying to talk somebody into perhaps building an accessible garden for you at your facility, or you're trying to talk a family member into trying some accessible gardening techniques. This talks a lot about the whys. The next one is called Accessible Gardening Tips, and it summarizes the information that we talked about today, and is a good one to just kind of get an overview of accessible gardening. This one is called Accessible Gardening Tools, and it provides a lot of parameters on how to help the tools work for you. It talks about tools in general, then it has things about things to look for in grips and handles and all of those components of tools. This one is one of my favorites. It's called Keep on Gardening, Create Your Own Tools. So again, it doesn't have to be expensive. So this looks at some different types of tools and gives you some conventional items that you can use instead of buying them, or some ways to make versions of these tools at home. Don't Let the Dirt Hurt gives 12 wonderful stretches that you can do either before or after you garden to ensure that you are working at your best and you're not getting hurt. That's a really good one. And finally, accessible gardening and reading reference resources. So this has resources for finding some really nice books online that you can download that give you, again, details of how to do this and options on how to garden in accessible gardening beds. It also talks about some of the areas that are available on our website with gardening in general in the El Paso area, so that once you decide how to garden and you try to figure out what to garden, it gives you a guide to that. And then it lists a couple of really good books in addition to the one that we just talked about. So these can all be found on our website, which I will show you how to access in a moment. So here are our resources, and there is our famous website. So go to txmg.org/El Paso / and you'll find tons of information about gardening and accessible gardening. If you go into the website and you click on the Learn tab, it will take you to the Garden Topics link. And from there, you'll find accessible gardening and fitness for gardeners. So the handouts that we talked about can be found there, in addition to hundreds of other handouts that talk about all kinds of gardening information. All right, this is kind of a moving target here. So right now we have a virtual help desk, but as the pandemic, I say progresses, but as it rescinds, we'll be changing things, but the information will be posted on our website. So go to our website to find out about this. This is the place that you will go if you want to request a tour or a presentation, or if you have a question for Bev and I about accessible gardening. There is a place on the website at our virtual help desk to actually ask that information, and we will get back to you and get you the information you need or set up a presentation. We also have Facebook, so please follow us on Facebook and you can see all the wonderful things that Master Gardeners do. And for ongoing gardening information, check out our YouTube channel. It can be found at EPC. It should be an __ Master Gardeners. It's not a dash, it's an _. And I wanted to share with you just a couple of photos of our wonderful accessible garden at Ascarity. This is our welcome sign in the middle. On the right-hand side is a raised bed. Bev is saying on the left-hand side. Down at the bottom here in the corner, this green thing is a raised bed that can fit 2 wheelchairs or 2 or 3 people standing. And you can see how big the crops have gotten in there and how well people are able to garden in there. And on the other side, whichever one that is, you will see a galvanized container and a trellis. and some of the other garden beds that are available. So I just wanted to throw that in there as a teaser to get you out to our garden. So we've got lots of information. Hopefully you're not overwhelmed, but inspired. But I want you to think about the fact that you already own the best gardening tools you're ever going to need. You already own some ears. So I want you to use your ears to listen to your body and what it is telling you. Listen to the person who you are co-creating with. And you have eyes. So use your eyes to quietly observe, to watch, and to see what needs to be created for each individual. And probably most importantly, listen with your heart as you embrace the opportunities waiting to be created, filling your garden with moments of sharing, learning, and doing. We wish you all a lifetime of happy, healthy gardening, and thank you for sharing your time with us.